All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session with Education USA meeting representative today from Creighton University, Ms. Megan Mankirian. I hope you will benefit a lot from today's session. So if you are interested in attending a medical school in the United
Hi, everybody. So I think we might be having a little bit of technical difficulties with Amira. So with that, I will go ahead and get started because I know you guys are eager to hear some great information about what it's like to study healthcare in the US and some different opportunities. So with that, let's jump in. So as Amira was saying, today I'm going to talk to you about what it's like to study healthcare and potentially be a doctor in the US, but also looking at so many other opportunities. It's a very different process in the US than basically anywhere else in the world. So there's a lot of things to think about and a lot of different pathways. So today we're going to talk about what some of those traditional pathways look like, as well as what are some other popular pathways that exist? My name is Megan Mankirian STEM. I am the Director of International Enrollment at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, which is right in the middle of the US. And a little bit later on towards the end, I will tell you a little bit about my university. So that way you can get to understand as well why I talk about healthcare and why this is an important program at my school. So first, I just want to say, maybe you've started doing a little bit of research on studying healthcare in the US, or maybe you've Googled, how to be a doctor in the US. This is going to be one of those times that maybe you're going to see a ton of these types of words that pop up in Google. And you think that it's been 5 minutes, but it's really been 2 hours, and you realize you've fallen down that Google black hole of information. You become very confused and not sure what's going on. So today I hope to clarify some of these terms and what all of these pathways actually look like. So first, I do want to talk about those traditional pathways, which would be medicine, dentistry, and pharmacy. These are kind of the oldest pathways and probably the most popular pathways that you see when you're looking at healthcare programs. In the US, this is going to be a two-part process where first you're actually going to do your bachelor's degree in a pre-healthcare track plus your major. Then you will take entrance exams and then you'll go to the professional school afterwards. So for most of these programs, you're looking at 6 to 8 years total of education. And then some of these programs will require a residency afterwards. And residency might be something you've heard about before, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. So what does this really look like? So let's talk about medicine. This is the most popular program that students ask me about. So what does this real pathway, include? So first, when you're looking at your undergraduate institution in the US, you're actually going to look for pre-medicine programs. You'll pick a major to go with it. Most students will pick a science, something like biology, chemistry, biochemistry. You might be interested in neuroscience, physics, psychology, but the coolest thing about it is you actually don't even have to study a science. I know students who study business or dance or history or English, do the pre-medicine program, take the MCAT, which is the medical admissions exam, and then go on to medical school after that. So for medicine in particular, the total process is going to be 8 years, so 4 plus 4. One question I'm often asked is, well, what does that pre-healthcare track include? Why is it that you can do pre-healthcare and then do any major you want? The pre-healthcare track for pre-medicine, pre-dentistry, pre-pharmacy is going to be a set of courses, a prerequisite set of courses that you have to take for admission into those professional programs. So it usually includes certain sciences like 2 years of biology with labs, 2 years of chemistry with labs. up to a certain level of math classes, social sciences like maybe psychology, sociology, English composition. The group of these courses is what these professional schools look for in particular for entrance into those programs. And then you're also going to be looking at those extracurricular activities. I'm sure you hear a lot about this already, especially for those of you who are in high school right now, about what do you need to be doing to get into your undergraduate programs? Well, it's very similar when getting into professional programs. They're still going to be looking for those extracurricular activities. So what you do right now in part of high school maybe is going to be great practice for what you might have to do when you go to university. So some other pathways that are similar to those traditional pathways are going to be programs like physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician's assistant, rehabilitation sciences. It's that same process as those traditional programs where first you'll do that pre-professional program plus your major, and then you would go to professional school afterwards. The cool thing about some of these programs, though, is that they are a little bit more flexible. So for many of them, it's going to be less time because there's a lot more opportunities for combined programs with these pathways. So for example, you might be able to do the full doctoral of physical therapy, maybe in just 5 or 6 years versus doing the full bachelor's degree of 4 years and then professional school after that. For a lot of these, there's also no residency requirement, which means once you graduate from your professional program, you can start working, which is great. It means you can start getting that job experience, you can start making money. So definitely something to consider. There are some challenges with a few of these fields, though, that some of them are newer that don't exist as robustly outside of the US. So for example, physician's assistant. It's a huge growing program in the US, very, very popular. The job of a physician's assistant is actually very similar to a doctor, but it's only a 2-year program instead of 4 years. So definitely a great opportunity. However, a degree as a physician's assistant, while it's great in the US, it's not really a thing outside of the US, which means if you plan on returning to your home country, that degree may not really translate back to your home country. So you do have to think long term about where you want to be. Another interesting example is the degree level may be different from country to country. So for example, physical therapy and occupational therapy in the US, these are full doctoral level programs. But in some countries, you only need to do the master's level program. And that's when you might look at a program like rehabilitation sciences, which is a master's level program. But once again, you have to think long term. Where do you want to be? In what level program are they going to be looking for? And then the last kind of challenge to think about is many of these programs do not accept international students today. I want to emphasize the word today because one of the interesting things is that a lot of universities are adding more of these programs as there's become more demand for them. Physician's assistant is a great example of this. My university, we added our physician's assistant program 4 years ago. And for a lot of these programs for the accreditation process, it says that you cannot accept international students until you've had program for 5 years. So if you were to look up a list of programs today, it's going to be very different than what you might see in a year or 2 years from now. So don't be discouraged by that, especially because you would have a long time before you apply for these programs if you are currently looking at your undergraduate programs right now anyway. So one of the things, though, that I often talk to students about is, they come to me and they say, well, I want to work in healthcare, therefore I have to be a doctor. And I say, but why do you have to be a doctor? There's so many opportunities in healthcare, and this field is always changing, always adapting. There's always something new. And here's just a couple opportunities that I'm seeing more and more international students look into. And I probably could list 5 more slides just like this, but I did want to pick a few of the top ones that I'm hearing more and more throughout my conversations with students. So, for example, nursing. Nursing is a 4-year program in the US. It's in very, very high demand, very well paid career field in the US. So it's definitely an interesting option. We are hearing a lot more about allied health, so things such as nutrition, exercise science, health coaching, things that when we really talk about healthcare and we start talking more about wellness as being part of healthcare and how we're living our everyday life, the things that we're eating, the things that we're doing, how we're moving our body, and looking at those types of pathways. Public health is very, very important, and we're hearing more and more about this, especially since the pandemic. In a lot of countries, including the US, realizing that we don't actually have enough people who work in public health, who can really be that bridge between the government and different communities, and really trying to make sure communities understand, the benefits of wearing a mask or getting the vaccine or having clean water, things like that. So I'm not going to go through all of these because, like I said, I could probably spend an hour on this slide alone, but definitely gives you some ideas of different things to think about when you're thinking about studying healthcare in the US. Another cool thing is a lot of these programs you can do in 4 years as a bachelor's degree, and you don't necessarily have to go into a master's or PhD or professional school. So you definitely have to think long term as well. How long do you really want to be in school? If you want to be in school for 8 years, great, definitely opportunities for that. But if you really only want to do your bachelor's degree, there are also some great opportunities that exist. One of my favorite areas, though, to talk about is the combination of healthcare and business. This is such an interesting crossroads that people don't often think about. This often comes up with students who come to me and they say, well, I want to work in healthcare, but my parents own a business, so they want me to study business, or vice versa. I want to study business, but my parents work in healthcare. What do I do? And the cool thing is there are actually a lot of opportunities to combine both of these. One very popular option is healthcare leadership or health administration, sometimes called healthcare administration or healthcare leadership and admin. You'll see a kind of combination of those terms at different universities. But this is a very interesting specialized field where we've seen that, especially in the US, a lot of healthcare systems and hospitals are really looking for experts who understand how to run a business, because at the end of the day, a hospital is a business, right? But also, how do you support the patients and maximize patient care? How do you make sure that you're supporting your doctors and nurses and staff? How do you handle insurance companies, which is a big issue in the US, plus anything that the government is telling you? It's a very, very delicate balance that you have to have. And so a lot of hospitals and healthcare systems are in very high demand looking at this program. The reason for this is because in the past, traditionally, a lot of people who've run hospitals are doctors or nurses who are ready to retire, or maybe they don't want to do patient care anymore. So they might move into one of these leadership and administrative roles, which could be fine. But a lot of times they're not necessarily trained to fully understand the full scope of that field. So really looking for people who truly understand this combination of needs, very, very important. Like every field, data and data analytics is very, very popular. Healthcare is no different. So there's a lot of jobs in health information systems, healthcare data analysts. You will see a huge growing area in the entrepreneurship of healthcare, especially if you're thinking maybe you love healthcare, but you also love technology. So many different startups in terms of different tech companies and apps that are specifically looking at the healthcare field and how we support people, to things like how can we use things like our Apple Watches or other fitness watches to be more accurate with our healthcare or to help take care of our health more, to really understand how are we tracking data and how are we using data to make decisions either at the government level, with insurance companies, with different healthcare systems. So if you really love kind of that tech and data side, but also are really interested in healthcare, tons and tons of opportunities. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the medical pharmaceutical sales and the healthcare marketing. A lot of people think that this job is only the people who work for pharmaceutical companies, who go to maybe a hospital or a doctor's office and try to convince doctors to, use the most current different drugs that are being developed, things like that. that is one job that exists in this field, but there's actually a lot of really, really cool opportunities. So for example, I actually have a friend who works in this field. Her job is she actually works for the company that invented the surgical robot. So I'm sure if you're interested in healthcare, you've seen maybe pictures of a surgery where it has the big robot that kind of works. So her job is as they create new techniques for the surgical robot, or some new procedures or new parts to it, her job is then to go to the hospital and actually train the surgeons and nurses on it. And then she actually will sit in the surgery with them and make sure that they don't have questions and make sure everything goes okay. So it's a really cool way to kind of be a bridge between some of these private companies and hospitals and doctors, and be a very important part of that process, but maybe not necessarily be particularly involved right in patient healthcare. One question I often get asked is, okay, well, what if I don't want to study medicine in the US? What if I want to study it in my home country and then go do my residency in the US? Is this an option? What does this look like? I don't want to study 8 years in the US when in my home country, maybe it's only 4 or 5 or 6 years. There are some different opportunities, and let's look at what some of those pathways look like. So first, you'll always find opportunities to be able to come do your master's or PhD in the US. Some popular options, of course, are getting involved in research, public health, the education sector, if you want to be a professor. Definitely lots of opportunities there. So especially maybe if you're already in medical school or dental school in your home country and you're thinking, I'm not really sure what I want to do next. Definitely keep your mind open and realize that you can come to the US and continue your studies maybe in something very specific that you want to do in your field. If you are thinking the medical pathway and you think, okay, well, what if I do my medical school at home and then I want to come do my residency and fellowship in the US? Is it possible? Yes. But I do want to emphasize that it is a very difficult process. There are different steps to it that you really have to think through. So the first thing is that you have to complete the STEP exams, otherwise called the USMLE. This is a series of 3 exams that you would take over several months to show your knowledge of medicine, the processes, systems, clinicals, things like that. These are the same exams that students take in medical school in the US. So it's the same, kind of the same pathway. The cost to take the STEP exams right now is about $2,600, depending on exchange rate, of course. So you would have to find somewhere in your home country that offers these exams for you to be able to sit down and take them. So great. You sit down, you take these exams, you do very well on them. Now what? The next step would be applying for residency programs in the US. Your residency is going to be 3 to 8 years, depending on your field. This is basically the on-the-job training portion of medicine. So maybe if you're thinking of being a general family physician or maybe an emergency room doctor, your residency may only be 3 to 4 years. However, if you're thinking about being a surgeon, you're probably looking at closer to 7, 8, 9 years, depending on what you want to do. Here's kind of the biggest hurdle that you will have to pass, though, in this process. Residency is highly competitive for all students. Right now, actually, in the US, there are more students graduating medical school in the US alone than residency spots available, which means residency positions are incredibly competitive. If you are not placed into a residency, most students will find a research position until the next round opens. And you have 2 years once you complete your STEP exams to get placed into a residency, excuse me, before you wouldn't be able to, use your STEP exams. And then once you do get that residency, if you are thinking about specializing within your field, such as maybe you do your residency in neurosurgery and now you want to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. So a neurosurgeon for kids, you may have to do that fellowship afterwards. So maybe you've already done an 8 or 9 year residency, and now you might have to add on a couple more years for that very specific fellowship before you can get your full license. So some common questions that I'm often asked by students like you. So what should you be doing today to start preparing for studies in healthcare? Maybe either in your home country or if you're really considering coming to the US. Some of these terms are probably not going to be a surprise that you've probably heard these things from if you're in high school, maybe from your counselor or some teachers or your principal, or maybe you've heard them from Education USA and things that you should be doing outside of the classroom. And this is really going to be those on the job or hands-on opportunities. So things like job shadowing, internships, volunteering. I know that some of these things have especially been difficult the last few years in a pandemic, but there are different ways that you can be very creative about this. So for example, use your networks, talk to your teachers or your parents or your professors or Education USA and see who they know in the healthcare industry and see if you could set up interviews with them and ask them questions like, what's your favorite part of your job? What's something you do in your job that you had no idea was part of your job? Or what's your least favorite part of your day? So that way you can start to get to know some of these professions a little bit more in depth as you're thinking about what you want to do with the next step of your education. As we've talked about today, there's so many different opportunities in healthcare. So, starting to narrow it down and really think about what you want to do is very, very important. I could tell you a little bit about my experience with this. So when I was in high school, I was planning to go to university to study pre-medicine. And so one of the things one of my teachers did is she set me up to job shadow a couple different types of doctors. So one day I got to job shadow a general family physician. That was great, saw a lot of really interesting things, but decided maybe that may be too broad for me. Maybe I wanted to look at something else. So then one day I got to job shadow a radiologist. And I'll apologize in advance if any of you are radiologists or your family members are radiologists, but honestly, it was not what I expected, and I did not have a very great experience. I thought that I was going to learn how to read an MRI or a CAT scan or things like that. No, I sat in a room the size of a closet in the dark, and we looked at x-rays all day long. And it happened to be influenza season in the US, which meant every x-ray was a chest x-ray. And I could probably still tell you today, many years later, looking at a chest x-ray and tell you if they have the flu or if they have a pneumonia. And that's what I did for 8 hours. It was so boring. And so it was a great way to learn that that was not the career path for me. And that's really kind of the great thing about trying to get to know people in the field. Maybe you find something you absolutely fall in love with, or maybe you realize that it's not exactly for you. Then the last point that I want to make is really researching the universities and the various opportunities on their campus to support your goals, which is something you're doing today. And if you're working with Education USA, then you probably see lots of opportunities for this. This can be very, very important, especially if you're thinking about healthcare and especially if you're thinking about doing your bachelor's degree in the US. It can be very, very tricky that as you talk to universities in the US, if you ask them if they have pre-medicine programs or pre-dentistry or pre-pharmacy programs on their campus, almost every university in the US is going to say yes. But just because they have that program doesn't mean that it's the right or best program for you. You need to ask them tougher questions and really dig into some of these questions. So maybe thinking about asking them, but what is your rate of international students getting into medical school or pharmacy or dentistry school? What do you do specifically to support your international students on these pathways? What do you do to help your students prepare for the MCAT or PCAT or DAT or GRE or GMAT, any of those entrance exams? Overall, what is your rate of your students getting into these professional programs? Those are going to be the type of statistics that you want to hear about that'll really tell you if this could be a good program for you. So with that, I'm going to take just a quick minute to tell you about my university and why I talk about healthcare programs. So Creighton University, as I mentioned, is in the middle of the US. We are in Omaha, Nebraska. We were actually started about 150 years ago as a science and medical university. So that's what we've been known for all along is our healthcare programs. And now we have programs in medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician's assistant, plus a lot of other graduate programs that lead to master's or PhD that are very research-based. So many, many different pathways that you want to do in healthcare, you can do at my university. We are very popular for students to come to us for their pre-professional programs and then stay with us for their professional school as well. So we do see a lot of students who will come here for 6, 7, 8 years, which is awesome. We are the largest Catholic healthcare education provider in the US and the only university in the US with 2 medical schools. We have a medical school on our home campus and a medical school in our second campus in Phoenix, Arizona. Our home campus, the medical school, does accept international students if you complete your bachelor's degree with us, which is very unique in the US. Not very many medical schools accept international students. So we're very popular for both US citizens and international students to come to us for pre-med and then look at our medical program. At the undergraduate level specifically, we do have about 150 different academic programs. So it's actually pretty common for students to maybe study something like business and pre-pharmacy or English and pre-dentistry. It's really nice that the way our programs are set up and all of our support programs for students really help you focus on things that you truly want to study and learn. One question I'm always asked is, why Omaha? Why would you come to the middle of the US? Maybe before today you haven't even heard of Omaha. So I will tell you, I've lived in Omaha for almost 6 years, and I really like it here. And I was actually very worried about moving here. I was living in Chicago at the time, and I kept thinking, Omaha's a smaller city. Is there really anything to do? Am I going to be bored? And the answer is honestly no. There's so much to do here. So Omaha has about 1 million people, so it's larger than what most people think. We are the top city in the world for Fortune 500 companies, which also makes us the #1 best city for paid internship, the #1 city for college grads, the #2 city for millennials. But my all-time favorite fact is that we are the #2 foodie city in the US. So any type of food in the world you want, you can get here, which is amazing because sometimes I really just want a great bowl of ful, or maybe I really want some falafel. I know where I can get my favorite falafel in this city. So it's great to know that there's so many different opportunities to fill your stomach. And then with that, this is my contact information. So after today, if you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. It could be today, tomorrow, next week, next year. I'm always happy to help answer questions either about my university or about any of these pathways and additional questions that you have about the US. We do have some time right now for Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can look at the questions, but I will also pop my email address in the chat box as well for you joining the Zoom. For those of you who are tuning in from Facebook, definitely reach out to your Education USA centers if you want to get in touch with me. They all have my contact information as well and can help get us connected. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know I've seen at least one question. You're so welcome.
Thank you so much, Megan, for today's presentation and for providing a lot of great resources for students who are interested in getting a degree, of course, in the United States in the specific field. And I'm sorry for any technical glitches that happened in the beginning of the presentation. So yeah. Okay, so this is a reminder for everyone who is watching, whether from the Facebook page or in the Zoom. A recorded version of the session will be available on our Facebook page and also on the YouTube channel. So if you just joined, you don't miss anything. So now it's the Q&A part. If you have any questions, make sure to type them down and Megan will be more than happy to answer them. So the same here for the Zoom attendees, make sure to type your questions. I'm going to start with the first questions that I received. So Megan, someone is asking, what is the best major to apply for in the undergraduate level in order to join a medical school later?
So really the answer to that question is whatever major you are truly excited about. The pre-medicine program is going to get you the classes that you need to be able to apply for medical school, which gives you the freedom to study whatever major you are really passionate about. If you love sciences, study a science, that's fine. But if you also want to take this time to study something else in the meantime, you can absolutely do that as well.
Perfect. We have another question here in the Zoom. So a student is asking, I have a bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical science and my graduation average is about 70%. I mean, this happened a lot to many students. I usually receive this question as well. So the student is facing like a problem when it comes to the admissions requirements. So, and he needs some tips on how to stand out.
So one thing I would think about doing is making sure that you either have a job or an internship right now that can really help build your profile. Of course, you can't go back and change your grades from your bachelor's degree, but you can take control of your hands-on opportunities right now. And then also really look at the types of programs you're applying to. You don't have to stick to just the top 100 universities in the US for great programs. There's over 4,000 universities in the US alone. So be creative and think about some of these other smaller schools that have some great programs as well that maybe aren't quite as selective. And also think about starting maybe as a master's degree and then switching into a PhD program or certificate program and moving into a master's or PhD program.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We have another student who left the question here. So someone is studying, he's in the third year of medical studies in Damascus University, and he's asking about if there are any available scholarships to pursue his medical studies in the US.
So this is a good question. So if you're doing your medical school right now, I would complete your medical school at Damascus University before you think about coming to the US. At this point, then you could reference that slide where I talked about taking the STEP exams and applying for your residency in the US, or thinking about master's or PhD programs in related fields in the US, depending on what you want to do. If you think about going into some of those master's or PhD programs, depending on the field, a lot of those are fully funded programs, which means you get free tuition and sometimes a living stipend to be involved in some of those really cool master's and PhD research programs. And the trade-off is you have to help faculty with their research, which is a really great trade-off, right? Because it means that you get some awesome hands-on training. Plus, sometimes you get to be published with it, which is super, super cool.
Great. Since we're talking about scholarships, so I have a question who wants to know if there are any financial aid opportunities or scholarships opportunities at the undergraduate level at Creighton University.
So at Creighton, yes, we do have scholarship opportunities on the undergraduate level. In fact, we actually guarantee scholarships for all students. Our application is also completely free. So I tell students, if you're interested and you want to have another university to consider, always do the application, see what your scholarship is, and we can see if it's going to be a good fit for you. We do not offer any additional financial aid beyond our scholarships. However, our largest scholarship for academics covers about 40% of the total tuition and fees that includes like the living costs.
Amazing. Okay. And again, if you guys have any questions regarding Creighton University, make sure to reach out to Megan. She's been very supportive to international students, and I really recommend her. Okay, moving to the next question. Someone asked, what is the difference between the STEP exams and the MCAT?
So the MCAT is going to be similar to an exam like the SAT or the GRE or the GMAT. So it's just one singular entrance exam. I will tell you that MCAT, though, is going to be kind of an extreme version of the SAT, if you want to think of it like that. The MCAT is an 8-hour long exam, guys. Like when I say extreme, I mean it is extreme. But the score on your MCAT will help determine if you're eligible to apply to medical schools and which medical schools that you may even be eligible to apply to. So the STEP exams, on the other hand, those are the exams that you take during medical school. So in the US in medical school, it's actually built into the program. So the first STEP exam you actually take towards the end of your second year of medical school, and then the other two you'll take during your third and fourth years. So that would be the main difference. So STEP exams you're taking during education. The MCAT is what we would take for admission.
Clear. Okay. Another student wants to know, get more details about the admission requirements to get enrolled at a pre-med program at Creighton University.
Yeah, so what we're going to be looking for, what I really look for in applicants overall, I want to see students who are good students. And it doesn't matter what curriculum you're in. I'm trained to understand every curriculum around the world. So it could be your national curriculum. You could be doing the Cambridge system. You could be doing IB, the American system. It doesn't matter. What I want to see is that within your curriculum, you are a strong student, you're doing well in your classes, and if you have the opportunity to pick classes, that you are picking classes that you enjoy taking and that you are doing well in. Beyond that, I'm going to be looking for those extracurricular activities because we know at Creighton, our most successful students are those who are able to balance academics plus doing things outside of the classroom, because those are the types of things that really help you get into professional school or get an internship or get a job. So we want to see that if you're balancing that already in your high school, then we know you're going to be a successful student on your campus. We do not need the SAT. So if you don't want to take the SAT, you don't have to. If you do take the SAT, I recommend submitting your scores because it could help you with your scholarship. But if you don't have the opportunity to take it, it's okay. We will likely need an English language exam. So the TOEFL, the IELTS, or Duolingo are the most popular. Yeah. And so I think we're on the Common App. So you can either do the Common App or our own application.
Amazing. We still have two questions, and thank you again, Megan. So another question is about double majoring. So someone asks, should I double major to better my chances of getting in medical school?
A good question. So I recommend double majoring if you have interests in multiple fields and you're super excited to learn about them. I was one of those students where I had 2 majors and a minor. So I did a lot, but I had a lot of interests. And so I wanted to study everything I wanted to. You don't have to double major. The most important thing is going to be that whatever you choose to study, which could be 1 major, it could be 2 majors, it could be a major and a minor, that you are passionate about it, that you really enjoy doing it, and that you do well in your classes. And so it's really nice in the US that you really have that freedom and flexibility to study what you love. And it, like I said, it could be a science, it could not be a science. And that's really nice to have that option.
Great. And the last question. So a student is asking, can pre-med requirements be taken at community colleges?
Ooh, this is a great question. So the answer is going to be not exactly. So one of the very tricky things that medical schools will look for is that your pre-medicine program or courses have to be taken at the university that you're graduating from. So, but this is why you have advisors at universities in the US. They will help make sure that you know kind of all of these weird ins and outs. But you can take some of your other electives at community colleges. So if you're thinking about, all of the courses you have to take for university, it could be that some other electives that you have to take as part of your general education requirements, or maybe some of the electives as part of your major, you might be able to take those at community colleges first. Or even taking it like in the summer, in between the semesters, to maybe either shorten your program or maybe just to make your semesters a little less stressful. Those types of things are opportunities, but you will have to take the specific pre-med program courses at the university you're graduating from.
Amazing. All right. So thank you again, Megan, for joining us today and for providing this great presentation for our followers. And I would like to thank everyone also for coming and for being interactive and asking a lot of interesting questions. If you still have any questions, maybe like specific questions to Creighton University, again, feel free to reach out to Megan. And if you have any questions about the application process in general, and maybe you want to choose the best fit or looking for any scholarships, make sure to reach out to me if you are from Libya, or make sure to reach out to the EduSA advisor of your country if you're following us from a different country. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep an eye on our Facebook page and register for our upcoming events. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.